She had $23 clutched in her pocket, a threadbare jacket offering little defense against the Chicago winter, and a life-altering decision looming before her. Jasmine, just 17 years old, stumbled upon a woman, seemingly near death, lying in the unforgiving snow. The easy choice, the one whispering self-preservation, was to keep walking, to disappear into the anonymity of the city. She could have saved herself from a world of trouble. Instead, something deep inside her, a flicker of empathy nurtured by her late grandmother, compelled her to act. She unburdened herself of the only warmth she possessed, her thin jacket, and gently draped it over the stranger's shivering form. Then, from the depths of her backpack, she retrieved her most cherished possession, a worn, threadbare blanket that had belonged to her grandmother, Rose. It was the last tangible piece of her past, the only thing connecting her to a love that had vanished from this world. Wrapping the elderly woman in its fragile embrace, Jasmine held her close through 8 agonizing hours of deadly cold, the wind howling like a hungry beast. By morning, both were teetering on the brink of oblivion, their bodies numb, their spirits fading. But destiny, it seemed, had a different script in mind, a twist so unexpected that it defied all logic. This isn't just a tale of survival. It's a testament to the transformative power of kindness, a chronicle of how one freezing December night forged an unbreakable bond, creating a family out of strangers and proving that sometimes, the person you rescue becomes your own savior. Stay with me because by the time you reach the end of this story, your perception of compassion will be forever altered. Welcome to Voice of Granny, where we share stories that warm the heart and challenge the soul. And while you're here, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know where in the world you're listening from. Let me paint you a picture of a night that would redefine everything Jasmine thought she knew about the world. A night so bone-chillingly cold, it felt as if the very planet had succumbed to an icy grip. This is a story woven with threads of choices, of selfless acts, and of the profound ripple effect that a single moment can unleash, transforming not just one life, but many. Imagine Chicago in December, the kind of winter night where the wind doesn't just blow. It claws, it bites, it penetrates every layer of clothing, leaving you raw and aching. The kind of night when most people scurry home, double-bolt their doors, and whisper a prayer of gratitude for the warmth and safety they take for granted. But for many, such comforts are a distant dream. Our story centers on Jasmine Brooks, a young woman barely on the cusp of adulthood at 17. 17. An age when most of her peers were consumed by the trivialities of prom dresses and college applications. Jasmine was grappling with the stark reality of where she would lay her head each night. She'd been navigating the treacherous currents of life alone since she was 14, the age when her grandmother, Rose, the only family she had ever known, was felled by a sudden stroke. 3 years spent drifting from one temporary shelter to another, crashing on friends' couches when she could, and, when all else failed, seeking refuge in the sterile bathrooms of libraries or the rumbling carriages of subway trains. On this particular December night, all Jasmine possessed was $23 and the weight of her circumstances. The group home, her most recent temporary residence, had reluctantly asked her to leave. It wasn't due to any misconduct on her part, but simply because she had reached the age of 17, making her ineligible for their services. They needed her bed for younger, more vulnerable children. Such is the cold, impersonal logic of the system. You age out. You're deemed old enough to fend for yourself. Good luck. She trudged through the affluent streets of Lincoln Park, a stark contrast to her own existence, desperately trying to conserve what little warmth her body generated, while simultaneously plotting her next move. The stately mansions stood tall and imposing, their windows radiating a cozy, inviting glow. Inside, families were gathered around dinner tables, laughing and sharing stories, basking in the warmth of companionship. Outside, Jasmine walked alone, her inadequate coat offering scant protection against the biting wind. She knew she didn't belong in this neighborhood. A young black girl with a worn backpack, walking slowly and deliberately past rows of multimillion-dollar homes. That was the kind of sight that often prompted concerned calls to the police. But Jasmine was driven by a primal need to stay warm, to keep moving, because if she stopped, if she allowed the cold to seep into her bones, she feared it would claim her entirely. And then, piercing through the wind's mournful howl, she heard it. A voice, thin and wavering, filled with confusion and fear. Every survival instinct screamed at Jasmine to ignore it, to keep walking, to avoid any involvement in other people's troubles. When you looked like her, when you had no fixed address and no one to vouch for you, getting involved was a dangerous gamble. It was the kind of thing that could lead to unwarranted suspicion, arrest, or worse. But the plaintive cries persisted, tugging at her conscience, and against her better judgment, Jasmine found herself drawn toward the sound. In the shadowed space between two imposing homes, she discovered an elderly woman. Her white hair, disheveled and wild around her face, framed a picture of utter vulnerability. She was clad in nothing more than a thin nightgown and flimsy slippers, her body racked with violent shivers in the sub-freezing temperature. She clutched something tightly to her chest, a framed photograph, its glass cracked and splintered. "Ma'am," Jasmine called out softly, her voice barely audible above the wind. "Are you okay? Are you lost?" The woman turned toward her, her eyes clouded with confusion and a hint of fear. "I need to find my daughter," she said, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. "Catherine. She's waiting for me. I'm late. I'm so late." Jasmine's heart sank. She recognized the signs. Her grandmother had exhibited similar behavior in the days leading up to her death. Dementia. This woman was clearly experiencing an episode, lost in the labyrinth of her own fading memories. "What's your name, ma'am?" Jasmine asked gently, trying to maintain a calm and reassuring tone. Margaret Stone. And I need to find Catherine." Jasmine scanned her surroundings. Empty streets. Not a soul in sight who could offer assistance. This woman was in imminent danger of freezing to death out here. "Do you know where you live, Miss Margaret? Can you tell me your address?" Margaret's face crumpled, a wave of anguish washing over her features. I can't remember. Why can't I remember?" In that instant, Jasmine was faced with a critical decision. She could call 911, the responsible choice, the safe choice. But Jasmine had learned, through hard experience, not to place her trust in the police. She knew that for a homeless black teenager, encounters with law enforcement rarely ended well. And if they found her here, alone with a disoriented elderly white woman who couldn't explain who Jasmine was or why she was helping, the situation could quickly escalate. Jasmine simply couldn't afford to take that risk. But she also couldn't abandon this woman to die. "Okay, Miss Margaret," Jasmine said, making her decision. "Let's figure this out together. Let's walk around and see if anything looks familiar." She took off her jacket, her only jacket, the sole barrier between her body and the deadly cold, and carefully wrapped it around Margaret's frail shoulders. But you'll be cold," Margaret protested, a fleeting moment of clarity piercing through the fog of her confusion. "I'll be okay," Jasmine lied, her voice firm despite the tremor of fear that ran through her. "I'm tougher than I look." They began to walk together slowly, Margaret leaning heavily on Jasmine's arm, her steps faltering and uncertain. They tried gate after gate, peering into darkened driveways, but nothing sparked a flicker of recognition in Margaret's eyes. She continued to talk, her conversation meandering through time, blurring the lines between past and present, calling out for people who might no longer be alive. The temperature continued its relentless descent, the wind whipping around them with increasing ferocity. Jasmine's thin, long-sleeved shirt offered virtually no insulation against the elements. After 30 minutes of aimless wandering, Margaret's legs buckled beneath her, and she sank to the ground. "I'm so tired," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Can we rest?" They were standing in front of a massive stone mansion, its imposing facade shrouded in darkness save for the harsh glare of security lights. There was a small alcove near the gate, offering a degree of shelter from the worst of the wind's assault. Jasmine helped Margaret to sit down, then settled beside her, her own body beginning to tremble uncontrollably. That's when Jasmine noticed it. a heating vent near the base of the wall, emitting a faint whisper of warmth. It was barely perceptible, but it was something. Maybe, just maybe, it would be enough to stave off the inevitable, to keep them both alive until morning. Jasmine rummaged through her backpack and retrieved the blanket from the very bottom. Her grandmother's blanket. Thin, worn, riddled with holes, but imbued with the comforting scent of home, of love, of everything she had lost. She had sworn to herself that she would never part with this blanket. It was all she had left of Grandma Rose. But looking at Margaret, so frail and confused and desperately cold, Jasmine knew what she had to do. She wrapped the blanket around both of them, pulling Margaret close, sharing what little warmth remained within its tattered threads. "What's this?" Margaret asked, her fingers gently tracing the soft fabric. "It was my grandmother's," Jasmine said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "She died 3 years ago. This blanket is all I have left of her." "Then you shouldn't waste it on me," Margaret said, her voice tinged with concern. "It's not wasted," Jasmine said firmly, her voice ringing with conviction. "My grandma would want me to use it to help someone. She believed in taking care of people." And so they sat, huddled together in the meager alcove, battling the encroaching cold as the temperature plummeted and the night deepened. Time is a fluid concept when you're fighting for survival. Every minute stretches into an eternity. Every hour feels like a lifetime. Jasmine checked her phone. 7:15 p.m. The battery indicator showed a mere 15%. She switched it off to conserve power, clinging to the hope that they might need it in an emergency. Though what emergency could be more dire than their current predicament, she couldn't imagine. The cold was unlike anything Jasmine had ever experienced. It wasn't merely uncomfortable. It was malevolent, insidious, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, that clouds your thoughts, that whispers temptations of surrender, urging you to close your eyes and drift into oblivion, even though you know that succumbing to sleep might mean never waking up. "Tell me about your grandmother," Margaret said after a long silence, her voice weak but laced with genuine curiosity. And so Jasmine spoke. She painted a vivid portrait of Grandma Rose, describing her infectious laugh that could fill a room with joy, her habit of humming hymns while she cooked, despite her inability to carry a tune, her unwavering dedication to working 2 jobs to provide for them, all while still finding time to help Jasmine with her homework, to listen to her stories, to make her feel loved and cherished. "She sounds wonderful," Margaret said, her voice filled with wistful longing. "She was," Jasmine said, her voice cracking with a mixture of grief and affection. "She taught me that being poor doesn't mean being unkind, that you can lose everything material and still be rich if you have a good heart." "She was right," Margaret said, her voice barely a whisper. Then her eyes glazed over, losing focus, and she grasped Jasmine's arm urgently. "Is Catherine coming? She's supposed to pick me up. She'll be here soon." "She'll be here soon," Jasmine reassured her, even though a growing sense of foreboding gnawed at her. She was beginning to suspect that Catherine might be gone, just as Grandma Rose was gone, lost to the relentless passage of time. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m. Jasmine kept talking, weaving stories, asking Margaret questions, anything to keep her awake, to keep her tethered to reality. Margaret drifted in and out of lucidity, sometimes mistaking Jasmine for Catherine, sometimes calling out for her husband, other times remarkably clear and present. During one of those lucid moments, around 11 p.m., Margaret looked at Jasmine with startling clarity, her eyes sharp and focused. "You're freezing," she said, her voice laced with genuine concern. "You're going to die out here trying to save me." "No, I'm not," Jasmine said, her voice trembling despite her best efforts, though she knew that her body had stopped shivering, a sign that her core temperature had plummeted to a dangerously low level. "We're going to make it through this night. Both of us." "Why are you doing this?" Margaret asked, her voice filled with a mixture of confusion and gratitude. "You don't even know me. You could leave. You could save yourself." Jasmine paused, considering the question. She thought about Grandma Rose's unwavering compassion, about the promise she had made at her grandmother's hospital bed, a vow to carry on her legacy of kindness. Because someone needed help, Jasmine said simply, her voice resonating with conviction. And I was there. That's reason enough. Margaret reached out with a trembling hand and gently touched Jasmine's face, her fingers frail and cold. Your grandmother raised you right, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She'd be so proud of you. Jasmine felt tears welling up in her eyes, freezing on her cheeks in the frigid air. By midnight, Jasmine was losing her battle against hypothermia. Her thoughts were becoming scattered, her vision blurred. Her body felt heavy and distant, as if it belonged to someone else. But she maintained her grip around Margaret, kept the blanket wrapped tightly around them both, shielded her body against the worst of the cold. Jasmine, Margaret's voice seemed to drift from a great distance. Are you still there? Still here? Jasmine mumbled, forcing the words through numb lips. Not going anywhere. Don't leave me, Margaret pleaded, and for the first time, she sounded truly scared, her voice like that of a frightened child. Please don't leave me alone. Never, Jasmine promised, her voice barely a whisper. I'm not leaving you. Around 2 a.m., Jasmine lost all feeling in her hands and feet. Her core temperature had dropped to a dangerously low level. She knew, in the part of her brain that could still function clearly, that she was dying. But Margaret was still alive, still breathing, still radiating a faint warmth against her body. That was enough. That had to be enough. Jasmine summoned images of her grandmother, of her warm smile and her infectious laugh, of the way she used to braid Jasmine's hair every Sunday morning. She thought about what Grandma Rose had taught her about staying kind, even when the world wasn't kind in return. I kept my promise, Grandma, Jasmine whispered into the darkness, her voice barely audible. I stayed kind right to the end. Margaret stirred against her, her head lolling slightly. Who are you talking to? My grandmother, Jasmine said, her voice dreamy. Telling her I love her. Tell mine I love her too, Margaret said, her voice slurred. And my Catherine. Tell them all I love them. I will, Jasmine promised, even though she was certain that they were both going to die here, frozen on the steps of this mansion. Two lost souls who had found solace in each other's company at the very end. The snow began to fall around 3 a.m. Big, heavy flakes that accumulated quickly, blanketing them in white like a frozen shroud. Jasmine's consciousness flickered in and out, blurring the line between reality and hallucination. One moment, she was acutely aware of the biting cold and Margaret's weight against her. The next moment, she was transported to a place of warmth and safety. A sanctuary where Grandma Rose was waiting, smiling serenely, reassuring her that everything would be all right. Just a little longer, Jasmine told herself, clinging to that image whenever she drifted back to awareness. Just hold on a little longer. But she had no idea if anyone was coming. Didn't know if anyone would find them before it was too late. Didn't know if she would ever wake up again, or if the next time she closed her eyes would be the last. All she knew was that she wasn't going to let go, wasn't going to leave Margaret alone, wasn't going to break her promise to stay. At 5:47 a.m., headlights swept across the snow-covered steps, momentarily blinding her. Jasmine struggled to open her eyes, but her eyelids felt frozen shut. She heard a car door slam, heard footsteps running frantically toward them, heard someone scream, a sound filled with raw terror and desperation. Mom! Oh my God! Mom! Jasmine managed to force her eyes open just a sliver. A woman was running toward them, tall, dark-skinned, wearing an expensive fur coat, her face contorted with horror and disbelief. This must be Catherine, Margaret's daughter. Jasmine tried to speak, tried to explain the situation, but her voice wouldn't obey. She summoned every last ounce of strength she possessed and forced the words out, each syllable an agonizing effort. She was lost, Jasmine whispered, her voice raspy and weak. I couldn't leave her. And then everything faded to black. Jasmine awoke to a sensation of warmth. A real, deep, penetrating warmth that radiated through her body, almost as painful as the cold had been. She was lying in a hospital bed, enveloped in layers of heavy blankets. Intravenous drips were slowly dispensing fluids into her arm, and monitors beeped rhythmically beside her. For a moment, she was seized by panic. Hospitals meant bills she couldn't pay. Hospitals meant questions she couldn't answer. But then a nurse appeared, a woman with kind eyes and gentle hands. "Welcome back, sweetheart," she said softly, her voice soothing. "You gave us quite a scare." "Margaret," Jasmine croaked, her throat raw and scratchy. "Is she?" "Mrs. Stone is fine," the nurse said, smiling reassuringly. "Mild hypothermia, but she's going to be perfectly okay. Thanks to you." Her eyes glistened with tears. "You saved her life, honey. You almost died doing it, but you saved her life." Jasmine felt a wave of emotion wash over her, a release of pent-up tension that left her weak but strangely peaceful. Margaret was alive. That was all that mattered. The door to the room swung open, and a woman entered. It was the same woman she had seen on the steps, Margaret's daughter. Up close, she appeared to be in her late 40s. Her natural hair pulled back in a neat bun, her eyes red and puffy from crying. Behind her stood 2 police officers. Jasmine's stomach clenched. Here it came, the questions, the suspicion, the assumption that she must have done something wrong. But the female officer stepped forward, her expression surprisingly compassionate. "I'm Detective Lisa Washington," she said, introducing herself. "This is Officer James Torres. We just need to understand what happened here. You're not in trouble, sweetheart." So Jasmine told them everything, recounting the events of the night with painstaking detail. Finding Margaret wandering in the alley, trying to help her find her way home, giving her her jacket and the blanket, sitting with her through the long, agonizing night. "You gave her your only jacket?" Margaret's daughter, Catherine Stone, asked quietly, her voice trembling with emotion. "In 15-degree weather?" "Yes, ma'am," Jasmine said, her voice barely audible. "She needed it more than me." "And this blanket?" Catherine said, holding up Grandma Rose's worn blanket, now clean and carefully folded. "The hospital staff said you told them it was all you had left of your grandmother." Jasmine nodded, unable to speak, her throat constricted with emotion. Catherine's eyes welled up with tears, and she struggled to compose herself. "Why? Why would you give up something so precious for a stranger?" "Because she needed someone," Jasmine said simply, her voice filled with conviction. "And I was there." Detective Washington closed her notebook. "Miss Stone, the report will clearly show that this young woman saved your mother's life. I'll make sure it's documented that way." After the officers excused themselves, Catherine pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, her gaze fixed on Jasmine. "Do you have somewhere to go when they release you from the hospital?" she asked, her voice gentle. Jasmine shook her head. "No, ma'am, but I'll figure something out. I always do." "No," Catherine said firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. "You're coming home with us." Jasmine blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. "Ma'am, you don't have to." "I want to," Catherine interrupted, her voice strong yet filled with compassion. "You saved my mother's life. You gave everything you had for a stranger. I have a guest house on my property. It's warm, safe, and private. You can stay there for as long as you need." I can't accept that," Jasmine whispered, overwhelmed by the offer. "You don't even know me." Catherine smiled sadly. "I know enough. I watched the security footage from my house, every minute of it. I saw you wrap your arms around my mother to keep her warm. I saw you willing to sacrifice your own life to save her." Her voice cracked with emotion. "You're not sleeping on the streets after that." Jasmine stared at her, afraid to allow herself to hope, afraid to believe that such kindness could be real. "My mother has dementia," Catherine continued, her voice softening. "It's been getting progressively worse. I have staff, I have systems in place to care for her. But that night, the door alarm malfunctioned. Mom wandered out. I was at a business conference in New York. If you hadn't found her, she wouldn't have survived the night." "But I did," Jasmine said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Catherine said, her voice filled with gratitude. You did. And now I'm going to help you the way you helped her. 3 days later, Jasmine was discharged from the hospital. Catherine picked her up in a sleek black car, and they drove to a part of Chicago Jasmine had only ever glimpsed from the windows of a bus. A world of opulence and privilege that seemed a million miles away from her own reality. The stone mansion was even more imposing in daylight. A sprawling masterpiece of brick and stone, its tall windows sparkling in the winter sun. As they passed through the wrought iron gates, Jasmine's gaze drifted to the spot where she had spent that terrible night. The small alcove where she had wrapped her body around Margaret. The steps where she had nearly lost her life. We're putting up a memorial there, Catherine said, noticing the direction of her gaze. A small plaque, a simple reminder of what really matters in this world. As the car pulled to a stop in front of the grand entrance, the front door swung open, and a teenage boy came running out, his face alight with excitement. He looked to be around 15, with Catherine's warm brown eyes and infectious smile. Is this her? He asked excitedly, his voice filled with anticipation. Is this Jasmine? David? Catherine said, her voice laced with amusement. Let her get out of the car first. Jasmine climbed out of the car, feeling self-conscious in her borrowed hospital clothes, acutely aware of her own lack of sophistication. You saved Grandma Margaret, David said, looking at her with unabashed admiration. You're a hero. I'm not a hero, Jasmine said uncomfortably, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. I just did what anyone would have done. No, a voice said from the doorway, challenging her modest claim. Margaret stood there, leaning on a walker, her eyes clearer and more focused than they had been that terrible night. You did what most people wouldn't do, she said, her voice firm. And that's exactly what makes you a hero. She shuffled forward slowly, and Jasmine met her halfway, taking her frail hand in her own. Thank you, Margaret said, her voice thick with emotion, tears streaming down her face. Thank you for staying with me, for not leaving me alone. I couldn't leave you, Jasmine said simply, her voice filled with sincerity. You needed help. Margaret patted her cheek with her free hand, her eyes filled with affection. You're a good girl, Jasmine. Your grandmother raised you right. Inside, the mansion was overwhelming. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, priceless works of art adorning the walls. Jasmine was acutely aware that the value of everything around her likely exceeded anything she had ever possessed. I know it's a lot to take in, Catherine said, noticing her hesitant expression. But this is your home now, Jasmine, for as long as you want it to be. As if on cue, a woman emerged from one of the side rooms. Patricia, the housekeeper, with kind eyes and a warm smile. Let me show you to your room, Patricia said, gesturing for Jasmine to follow. Jasmine followed her up a sweeping staircase, David trailing behind them, chattering excitedly about school, his basketball team, and his cat named Professor. Patricia opened a door at the end of a long hallway, and Jasmine stepped inside and stopped, her breath catching in her throat. The room was huge, larger than any apartment she had ever lived in. A real bed with a thick, inviting comforter, a desk positioned beneath a sun-drenched window, a bookshelf overflowing with titles she longed to explore, a spacious dresser, and a door leading to a private bathroom. It's too much, Jasmine whispered, overwhelmed by the sheer luxury of it all. It's yours, Patricia said firmly, her voice gentle but resolute. All of it. After everyone had left, Jasmine sat on the edge of the bed and carefully unpacked her few possessions, the sum total of her worldly belongings. Grandma Rose's photograph, the journal she had been writing in since she was 14, and a worn book of poetry. She placed the photograph on the nightstand, her fingers tracing the familiar lines of her grandmother's face. And for the first time in 3 long years, Jasmine cried. Really cried. Not from sadness, but from an overwhelming sense of relief, of gratitude, of the profound, life-altering realization that she was finally safe. The first few weeks were the most difficult. Jasmine lived with a constant sense of unease, waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Catherine to realize that taking her in had been a mistake, for someone to tell her that she didn't belong. She barely touched anything in her room, afraid of leaving a trace of her presence. She made her bed every morning with military precision, striving for a level of order that reflected her inner turmoil. She ate sparingly at meals, conscious of not wanting to be a burden. She moved through the mansion like a ghost, trying to blend into the background, trying not to leave a mark. On the 6th day, Catherine found her in the library. Catherine could sense Jasmine's anxieties swirling like a tempest within her. As she drove Jasmine to the testing center, a wave of maternal warmth washed over her. Before Jasmine could even open the car door, Catherine reached out, her hand gently resting on Jasmine's shoulder. "Whatever happens today," Catherine began, her voice laced with genuine affection, "know that I am immensely proud of the person you are. Your worth isn't defined by the outcome of a test. True success lies in your spirit, your character, not in some arbitrary score." The test stretched on for what felt like an eternity, 4.5 hours of intense focus. Some questions were like old friends, instantly recognizable. Others demanded meticulous thought and careful consideration. And then there were those that were simply a guessing game. The agonizing wait for the results would be 6 weeks long. 6 weeks of nail-biting anticipation, of waking up in the dead of night, drenched in a cold sweat, the what-ifs echoing in her mind. But during those 6 weeks, an unexpected transformation was taking place within the stone mansion. Catherine, once consumed by her work, began prioritizing her family. She started coming home earlier, making it a point to share dinner with Jasmine, Margaret, and David every night. She even joined David in his video game escapades, much to his delight. She would sit with Margaret, listening intently as she recounted cherished memories from the past, stories that painted a vivid picture of a life well lived. One evening, Catherine found Jasmine nestled amongst the towering bookshelves in the library. "I've hired a new operations manager," Catherine announced, a hint of excitement in her voice. "Someone I trust implicitly to handle the day-to-day operations of the real estate firm." Jasmine looked up, surprised. "Why?" she asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. Catherine's gaze softened, her eyes filled with a depth of emotion. "Because that night," she said, her voice thick with gratitude, "when you risked everything to save my mother, you showed me what I had lost sight of. I'd been so consumed by building an empire, chasing success, that I forgot to build a life, a meaningful connection with the people I loved. You reminded me of what truly matters." Then, on a seemingly ordinary Thursday in May, the fateful envelope arrived. Jasmine stood frozen in the kitchen, her eyes fixed on the crisp white rectangle. It held her destiny within its folds, either her GED certificate, the key to her future, or a dreaded failure notice, a crushing blow to her dreams. David, sensing her apprehension, materialized at her side. "Want me to open it?" he offered, his voice filled with brotherly support. "No," Jasmine replied, her voice barely a whisper. I'm really scared." David, remembering the night he'd thought he might lose his grandmother, reminded her, "You told Grandma Margaret everything would be okay that night. You promised." Despite her fear, Jasmine couldn't help but smile at David's unwavering faith in her. Taking a deep breath, she steeled her nerves and tore open the envelope. She had passed. And not just passed, she had soared, scoring in the 91st percentile overall. "I did it," Jasmine whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. "I actually did it." "You did it," David screamed, jumping up and down with unrestrained joy. Catherine, hearing the commotion, came running into the kitchen. "What happened? Is everything all right?" "Nothing's wrong," Jasmine exclaimed, tears of pure joy streaming down her face. "Everything's right. I passed. I'm going to college." Catherine enveloped Jasmine in a tight embrace, and Jasmine realized, with a pang of bittersweet emotion, that it was the first time she had been hugged by a mother figure since Grandma Rose's passing. That night, the stone mansion buzzed with celebration. They feasted on Jasmine's favorite meal, a testament to her accomplishment. Margaret, enjoying a rare moment of clarity, raised her glass, her voice strong and clear. To Jasmine, she proclaimed, who reminds us what it means to be brave and kind and human. And Jasmine, looking around the table at the faces of the people who had become her family, felt a warmth spread through her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. It was pure, unadulterated joy. 3 years later, Jasmine Brooks stood confidently in front of a lecture hall at Chicago State University, captivating her audience with her powerful story. She was now a vibrant 20-year-old, diligently pursuing her bachelor's degree while working part-time at a non-profit organization dedicated to serving the underserved. People always ask me, Jasmine said, her voice resonating with passion, why I gave everything I had that night to save a stranger, why I risked my life. And my answer is always the same. Because that's what we're supposed to do. That's what makes us human. She scanned the diverse group of students, young minds preparing to embark on careers built on compassion and care. It's not about grand gestures or heroic moments, Jasmine continued, her words carrying the weight of her experience. It's about the small choices we make in critical moments. To stay or walk away, to help or ignore, to see people or look through them. After the lecture, a young woman approached Jasmine, her face etched with weariness, her eyes holding a depth of pain that belied her age. I need help, she said quietly, her voice barely audible. I aged out of foster care last month. I'm trying to stay in school, but I've been sleeping in my car. Jasmine reached out, placing a comforting hand on the young woman's shoulder. Hey, it's okay, she said gently. We're going to figure this out together. Have you eaten today? The student shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. Come on, Jasmine said, her voice filled with warmth and reassurance. Let's get you some food, and then we'll talk about housing and resources. Sound good? As they walked across campus together, Jasmine couldn't help but reflect on that cold December night 3 years ago, the night that had irrevocably changed the course of her life. She thought of Margaret, Catherine, and David, the family she had found in the most unexpected of circumstances, and the life she had painstakingly built from the ashes of her past. Why are you helping me? The student asked, her voice filled with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. You don't even know me. Jasmine smiled, remembering asking Catherine the very same question years ago. Because my grandmother once told me that you're never poor if you still have kindness, Jasmine said, her voice filled with conviction. And because nobody should have to feel invisible. I felt invisible for so long. The student whispered, her voice choked with emotion. I know, Jasmine said, her heart aching with empathy. But not anymore. We've got you now. After connecting the student with immediate help, Jasmine drove home to the Stone Mansion, her true home, a sanctuary filled with love and belonging. David was there, back from his first semester at Northwestern, eager to share his experiences. Margaret was sitting in her favorite chair by the window, enjoying one of her increasingly rare clear days. Catherine was in the kitchen, humming softly as she cooked dinner, a newfound passion she had discovered while building a family. How was the presentation? Catherine asked, turning to greet Jasmine with a warm smile. Good, Jasmine replied. Help the student after. She reminds me of me. They all remind you of you, David said with a playful smile. That's why you're so good at this. After dinner, Jasmine walked out to the front steps, to the spot where it had all begun, the place where her life had been forever transformed. A small memorial plaque had been installed there, just as Catherine had promised, a lasting tribute to the night that had saved them all. In memory of the night that saved us all. Home is where someone waits for you. Family is who stays. Jasmine reached out, gently touching the plaque, as she always did when she needed to remember, to reconnect with the essence of that fateful night. Still talking to them? David's voice came from behind her, breaking the silence. Jasmine turned and smiled, her heart overflowing with love for her chosen family. Always, she replied. David came to stand beside her, his arm brushing against hers. You know what I realized? He said, his voice thoughtful. That night saved all of us. Grandma Margaret, obviously, but also Mom. It reminded her what mattered. Me, it gave me a sister and showed me what real courage looks like. And you, it gave you everything. We saved each other. That's what family does, Jasmine said softly, her eyes filled with gratitude. Inside, Catherine watched them through the window, her heart filled with a profound sense of peace. She thought of her mother, the matriarch who had shaped her life, and the strange miracle of that December night, the night that had brought them all together. She marveled at how sometimes the people we save end up saving us right back. Last month, Catherine had taken a leap of faith, embarking on a project she had been contemplating for years. She had established a foundation, the Margaret Stone Foundation for Youth Empowerment, dedicated to providing housing, education, job training, and unwavering support for young people aging out of foster care or experiencing homelessness. And she had asked Jasmine to help run it, recognizing her unique ability to connect with those who had been marginalized and forgotten. Your perspective, your lived experience, Catherine had said, her voice filled with admiration. It's invaluable. These kids need someone who understands, someone who's been there. And so, Jasmine now spent her days immersed in her social work studies, and her evenings volunteering at the Foundation's first shelter, pouring her heart and soul into helping teenagers who had been failed by the system, young people who had learned to be invisible. She brought her own experience, her own unwavering understanding, her own refusal to walk away. One evening, a 17-year-old girl named Aaliyah walked into the shelter, her eyes wide with fear and uncertainty, her shoulders slumped with the weight of her circumstances. She was scared, alone, and trying desperately to be brave. First time here? Jasmine asked gently, her voice filled with compassion. Aaliyah nodded, her gaze fixed on the floor. I'm Jasmine, she said, extending a hand. Want some food? We've got spaghetti tonight. Real food. The good stuff. As Aaliyah ate, her hunger slowly subsiding, Jasmine sat across from her, her presence radiating warmth and empathy. She spoke the words that had once been spoken to her, words that had offered a lifeline in her darkest hour. I was homeless, too. I know how hard it is, but you don't have to do this alone anymore. Aaliyah looked up, searching Jasmine's face, finding only understanding, only acceptance. What happened to you? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. How did you get out? And so Jasmine told her story, not the sanitized version that appeared in news articles, but the raw, unfiltered truth, the fear, the cold, the desperation, the unwavering determination, and the choice to help someone even when it cost everything. Sometimes, Jasmine said, her voice filled with conviction. All it takes is being there, being willing, being kind, even when it's hard. Can I stay here tonight? Aaliyah asked, her eyes pleading. Absolutely, Jasmine said without hesitation. And tomorrow we'll talk about next steps. You don't have to be alone anymore. That night, as Jasmine drove home through the bustling Chicago streets, she thought about all the lives that had been touched, transformed, and irrevocably changed because of one impossible night. Margaret, who had lived her final years surrounded by love, her spirit soaring in the embrace of family. Catherine, who had rediscovered the importance of connection, prioritizing family over the relentless pursuit of success. David, who had gained a sister, a confidant, a lifelong friend, and learned the true meaning of courage. Aaliyah, and dozens of other forgotten kids, who were finding hope, healing, and a second chance at life. And herself, Jasmine Brooks, who had gone from invisible to essential, from homeless to home, from a life of uncertainty to a future filled with purpose. The snow started falling, gentle this time, beautiful, not dangerous, a soft blanket of white transforming the city into a winter wonderland. Jasmine pulled up to the mansion, to the home where someone was always waiting, where family meant the people who chose to stay, the people who loved unconditionally. She reached out and touched the memorial plaque one last time before going inside, a silent gesture of gratitude to the woman who had changed her life. Thank you, Grandma Rose, she whispered, for teaching me that kindness changes everything. Inside, the lights were warm and inviting, casting a golden glow upon the scene. David was setting the table, his laughter echoing through the halls. Margaret was humming softly in her chair, her eyes sparkling with contentment. Catherine was pulling a freshly baked pie from the oven, the aroma filling the air with the comforting scent of home. "There you are," Catherine said, turning to greet Jasmine with a radiant smile. "We were waiting for you. Dinner's ready." And Jasmine walked into the warmth, into the light, into the life she had built from one impossible choice on one impossible night. The choice to stay. Before you go, I want you to think about something. Every single day you have a choice. When you see someone struggling, someone in pain, someone who's been made invisible, you can walk away or you can stay. You can protect yourself or you can reach out. Jasmine was just 17 years old with nothing to her name, but she chose kindness. She chose to stay, and that one choice changed everything. What choice will you make? If the story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, you're never poor if you still have kindness. Thank you for listening.